Now we move on from the high school. What happened after that?
So after high school, a lot of things happened in between, and because I went to a good high school, there was a lot of positive influence. I would hear stories of these people who went to amazing schools abroad, to Harvard, to MIT, to Stanford. Also saw a few people who went to Oxford. So in my mind I thought, hey, if you come to this school, then you have a chance to go abroad. So that was always at the back of my mind. I didn't know how to do that, because some of my schoolmates were fortunate enough to be in part of programs such as Equity Leaders Program, where they were guided on how to write essays, on how to do SATs and all that. I had no idea on how to do that. I was still the village boy.
So Dan, you've moved from the village, you've come to town, and you've interacted with these, town boys, city boys that, are bouncing and talking a particular way. Is there any particular sort of character that you thought that maybe if I borrow this character and go back to Katumbi or Sekuru, these guys are going to see, this is the man? Is there that particular character that you sort of admired and sort of wanted to take back to the village?
Look, interesting question. I'm a bit of a different person. Firstly, I don't think I'm better than anyone. Wherever I go, I want everyone to feel at home with me. And yes, of course, many things rub on you. The way you articulate things, the way you relate with people, your new hobbies, like the new drinks that you take, that rubs on you, and you might come across as different. And I noticed when I came back in the village, people began to treat me like I was different. But I didn't like that as much. I wanted them to see me much like the guy they went to primary school with, the guy they went to church with. But like all these labels have to be attached to you. Maybe nowadays you ask for a fork in the restaurant. Nowadays you dress a particular way. Nowadays you stop going to particular joints that you used to go. So those things happen, but I wouldn't say I consciously wanted those things to rub on me so that my friends or my people in the village would think that I'm superior to them. Sometimes it just happens. It just happens that now you listen to a different kind of music. It just happens that, now you know about English Premier League, all the players. It just happens that you've been to the biggest hotels in Nairobi or wherever. It's something you can't run away from. But for me, it was very important that I could still relate with my friends properly.
Throughout your journey, you've always strived to remain yourself. Now I know it can't be easy to remain yourself with all the noise coming in from the popular culture, from the different experiences, from the different people that you interact with. How as the strive to remain yourself, how did it shape your story as you applied for the scholarships to go abroad?
I think self-confidence is very important. So if every day you're trying to be like someone else, you will lose your voice. But if you're confident that you're good enough, that you're able, that you have the ability, that will be the source of your strength. So even when I got a bit of rejections, I still knew that I was good enough. When I read the description of the person they were looking for, I say to myself, I am that person. Maybe in a slightly, not in the most conventional way, but I am that person. I just need to remain true to myself and to tell my story the best way. So everybody has their story. Everybody tells their story their own way. I read a lot of essays online, but I thought, hey, I don't sound like that. I'm never going to tell my story like that. And if that is all it takes to succeed, then I'm happy to remain the way I am. So I decided to perfect telling my story the best way I know how.
Interesting. Now let's go abroad. Take us abroad. You landed in the UK for the first time ever. The plane touches down. You're getting off with your luggage. What was your first thought the very moment you stepped the UK soil for the first time? How was the feeling? What were you thinking at that particular time?
Firstly, I mean, you thank God for it, because you get to know for a bit of time that you'll be going to this new country. But there are so many things that can go wrong, your sponsorship could be revoked, your visa might be rejected, and also like journeys, flying is not 100% sure that you'll get wherever you're going. And actually on the day I was almost left by the plane because, last minute Kenyan jam. So firstly it was a relief, like, wow, I'm here. And then secondly, what struck me was like everything looked so clean. It's because I was staying in Juja, and there was a lot of dust in most places. And I get to the UK, I look around and I'm like, wow, why is every building so clean? Like, do they like clean every day? Like, what exactly is happening? So that was a bit of a surprise. And then I walk around like during the drive to my accommodation, and I realized, although I was in the city, like buildings were not super packed. Like there were parks, like after every few buildings, like you see a park, a kids playing place, like a place to just sit and chill. And I was like, wow, so much land. We should construct something here.
Don't say that to somebody.
So that was a bit of a surprise. And then I also realized, because I'd seen pictures of New York and so on, like there were very tall buildings. But then I went to Edinburgh and I realized, they've decided to preserve, their culture. And the buildings that they had, that all they do is renovation of those buildings. So I was like, where are the tall buildings? I can't see them.
I want my tall buildings.
Mm-hmm. And then of course there are all those other things, like, I mean, I don't know if this is right to say, but just because you're not used to, okay, how do I put this? When you're in Kenya, you have a particular perception of white people. Like people call them Mzungu, like people imagine them as masters. So it was weird a bit to be served by them.
Yeah.
It was a bit weird at first, because it's just, the place you grew up, that's not how things were done. So to have, a person of that color carry your luggage or drive or, wash your room, like that was a bit much.
You're in a new country, new continent, new race, the popular race in that particular country. Even the temperatures are different. How did you take that? How did that influence you? Did you still remain the village boy, or did that change how you started now moving forward after you landed in UK?
Good question. Going abroad is a lot. When I got my offer and my scholarship, it's a lot of excitement, and then you have to go through the passport application, the visa application, you start going to these really fancy offices, and you become a regular in Nairobi, which was quite nice. And then all the excitement of boarding a plane for the first time, that was amazing. I remember on my first flight, I did one mistake though. I took a lot of wine, because when you're flying, they keep on offering drinks, and I was so excited. I didn't anticipate how long the flight would be, so it was just like, oh, red wine, white wine, mix it up. Bad idea. So by the time I landed, my eyes were so red, and just like I need to sleep. But anyway, I had an amazing first experience flying. It was at night, so I didn't see much outside. But truly, when you hear those words, ladies and gentlemen, I'm your captain, we'll be cruising 38,000 feet, and you think about it, you're like, wow, this is amazing. And then I got to Edinburgh, a very beautiful city. Very old buildings though, because it's a UNESCO Heritage Center, and people usually say it's very grey. But so some of the things there are a lot of things that shock you in terms of the culture. Firstly, it's food. In Kenya, I was used to any restaurant you went to, you could order ugali or rice and some stew, like that was the standard thing that you would order. And then I get to Oxford, I go to the restaurants, I look at the menu, and I can't recognize anything from those names. So the experience of going to the restaurant became a stressful experience. Every time I was part of a new student society with these students from European countries or from America or from wherever, and they're like, hey Daniel, we should go to the restaurant. That just begins stressing me up, because I'm like, okay, we will get there, but what am I going to order? Because I have no idea what these things are, and I'm afraid to ask them, hey, what is this? I don't want to look stupid, but you really don't know. What that food is. You grow to understand that, you grow to understand what you like, and you also grow to realize everyone is as lost as you are. To meet with other boys, you have to go drink beer, because it's kind of weird for a man to be like, hi Daniel, do you want to go for dinner? Nowadays I invite my friends for dinner and stuff, but at that time, the standard way to engage was to go grab a beer, maybe as you watch some football or whatever. Like, it was the standard way to interact. So that was quite interesting.
A lot of different points on culture shock, the food, the weather, the social activities. These things were all screaming at you. How did you remain the village boy as we conclude now? How were you able to quiet the noise and still remain the village boy?
It's very tough. You have a lot of fights with yourself. You spend the day, you get to the house, you're so stressed, you're so all over the place, and you remember your interactions of the day, and you're like, hey, that was so embarrassing, or I should have said this and not this. So it's quite a journey. And I think one thing that helps sometimes is to stay close to people who are more like you, people with the same background as you. I was lucky to have some friends who are Kenyan, some friends who are African, and somehow when we talked, we could relate. Or there were also societies I could go to, African societies and so on, and it helps to go there and complain. To just, it's not like you're talking badly about other people, but to just be like, hey, did you notice this? Did you see this?
To rant.
Yeah, to rant, to just get it off
Let
the
it
system.
out. Yeah.
So that helps, and it makes you realize that you're not the only one.
Yeah.
And I think that highlights the importance of sharing.
Yes.
Like even our most uncomfortable moments and being open, because when you share, firstly you get it off your chest, and then secondly other people realize that these struggles are not unique to just themselves. They're like, because every time you tell a story you think it's sad, someone else is like, oh hey, I've experienced that too. Someone else says me too, and that way, it becomes more bearable.
Yes.
But as I said, you can't really remain the same. Of course, you're going to grow. You're going to learn new things. And what I usually say is, when you're going through these transitions, you have to keep an open mind. There is a philosophy called, you have to be ready to learn, to unlearn, and to relearn, because sometimes you encounter new cultures, new things, you will need to learn. You were used to a certain way of doing things, you might have to unlearn some things, and sometimes you unlearn things, and later on you realize, oh, actually the way I was doing things was the best way, so you'll have to relearn that. And then the other thing is just, you don't need to try too hard to fit in. If you're trying too hard to fit in, then that's not your crew. It doesn't matter where people come from. Some people, you just click with them. In class, it ended up to be that my best friend was from Hong Kong. Our upbringings were very different, but we clicked.
Living in the UK for the first time couldn't have been easy, because of the difference in the cultures. I mean, even the infrastructure, the modes of transport and everything was different from what you're used to here in Kenya. How did you maneuver your way through to becoming comfortable in the UK?
Thanks for the question. The village I grew up in the life was not easy there. As I said, I had to fight hyenas as I went. In the shamba, you had to fight birds and to chase them away from eating your crop. So every day you had new challenges to navigate. But in the UK, I was lucky to have a support system. To have a student who was allocated to me to be my family. So they taught me the basics. So firstly, when you're abroad, Google Maps is very important, because Google Maps will tell you which bus to take, where to get off from the bus when you're traveling. When you're walking, it will guide you through. It will tell you how long it's going to take to get wherever you're going. So that helped. In terms of food and getting used to that, it took time. It was not comfortable, but it took time. After a while, you find your way around. But I think it's resilience that I got from when I was younger that sort of pushed me to navigate.
So now you've lived in the UK for 5 years now, 5+ years,
yeah.
And you've come back to Kenya and you've been in the village. How do people perceive you when you go back to the village where you grew up? What are the kind of questions people ask you? What have you found to be different from before you went and after you came back?
Yeah, we talk about what we call reverse culture shock. When you go away for a very long time and you come back, you realize that you've gotten accustomed to life wherever you are. So the first time I came back after a year, my biggest culture shock was I was trying to get a bus home, and I was used that in Scotland buses are always on time. and you can always tell when you're going to arrive wherever you're going. And so I went to Isili and got on a bus. I wanted to go to Mwingi, and they said, hey, we are leaving in 15 minutes. So I looked at my watch and I was like, 15 minutes. Okay. And the journey, I did the math in my head, should take at most 4 hours, so I knew what time I would arrive. But I kid you not, I was there waiting for like 2 hours instead of 15 minutes. So that was a lot. Like, it shocked me, but a year ago, like, it wouldn't have shocked me that happened. In terms of the questions that people ask, people have a lot of expectations. Of course, they would expect that, one, your accent will have changed. Number two, they expect that you have a lot of money. Crazy amounts of money. They don't care if you are a student or whatever. Like, it's like they feel like there's somewhere you are going to scoop money. They also ask questions about relationships, of like, do you now have a girlfriend who is, from this part of the world, and so on. So, you have to navigate with those. It's quite sad sometimes that people don't ask you how you are really, because the challenge with that, when people put you on a pedestal, everyone has challenges on day to day. So if you start talking to me like I'm this celebrity, someone from heaven, I won't have a chance to actually talk about what matters to me, because you just want these aesthetic things of like, so which iPhone do you have now? Or like, can you, like, you go out with your friends and they want you to pay all the time, so, but it's nice, you get used to it, and your friends also cool down after a while.
Yeah, it takes a lot of getting used to the life from both sides. I mean, people have very high expectations of people living abroad. When you hear someone is living in the UK, in the US, and you're a village boy like myself, the assumption is that these guys have money trees, what? these guys are coming with lots of money and their Muzungu girlfriends. But anyway, it takes a story like this to really understand what goes on from the perspective of someone who's actually experienced it. And that's why we have this platform to tell these stories. Thank you very much for watching.
So it's very important to choose your tribe well, or the people you relate with. Sometimes it might even happen that you relate more with people who are not even from your country, and that is okay. Like, there's no, it's still the same for when I was talking about high school. Like, you might think you will relate better with people from your tribe or from the location you come from. But it's not always true. It's also the case when you go abroad. It's possible that you're not going to click right away with, because even within Kenya, like, there are many different characters of people. There are many different social and cultural classes. There are many different experiences. So it's not always true that your experiences are going to be exactly the same, because people expect, because you're all Kenyans, you should be the same, because you're all Africans, you should be the same. But the truth is, you're not.
So Dan, tell me, what is the one thing that you did as a young boy in a village that to date you've never forgotten?
Well, that's an interesting question, Henry. A lot of interesting things happened. Our fights every day as we went home, like, we had a timetable on who will fight who. I wouldn't say that those are the fondest memories, but I have some scars for that. So, of course that's memorable. But I think mostly I remember the kindness of people. I remember people, who spend time to encourage me or to do things for me. I remember when I was in class 4, there was a period I would be ill very often, and there was this guy he was a bit older than me. He had just repeated school, and so we became classmates, though he was much, much older than me. And I remember every time I felt sick, because he had a bike, he would actually also stop school and cycle me home to make sure I get home every other day. So I remember the kindness of such people, and he really helped me a lot through a lot of things. And he didn't get the high marks I got to and go to a national school and so on. He's still pursuing his life, he's doing well, but I really remember that he was that kind to me. I was very small, so I needed some protection from a bigger guy even when we went for sports, so it's nice I had that.
Wow. What can I say? That's very touching, very inspiring. And to you who is watching today, remember, your act of kindness today does not have to be repaid immediately. It's been, I think, 10, 20 years later, and you still remember. So be kind. And that's why we have this channel, this platform, African Nostalgia, so that we get to hear your story and share our story, so that it becomes bearable even for those who think they've gone through so much struggle. We've heard from Jan, very interesting story. You have to learn, you have to unlearn and relearn. Thank you very much for tuning in to yet another episode of African Nostalgia. Till next time, bye-bye.
Goodbye.